with two mentions. One pulling each way.
You can follow my story in your Bibles, if Genesis chapter 40. Kind of keep up with me and the life that I went through and what was going on. You know, I'd been thrown in prison, but when I got thrown in prison, God put his hand in there too, and everything I touched was just magnified. All my life, everything that happened, that even me, you know, your story in here don't really tell inner feelings of people, but even me, how do you think I felt when my brothers threw me in that pit? You know, it wasn't something that I said, well, God put me in here. You know, I had other thoughts. I saw later on where God put me in there. I saw later on where God had me sold. I saw later on why Potiphar's wife did what she did. But I didn't see those things at that immediate time. I kept being human, was like you, and I was a young teenager, 17 years old. And things were starting to happen that I didn't understand. But I still kept my faith in God. I knew that God had a plan. I knew that God had a purpose. And even when I was thrown into prison, something about me, about my actions, and what you try to teach people today is watch your actions, because people are watching you. They can tell a lot about you by just watching you, and you never know who's watching you. I never knew who was watching me. But I was sitting there in prison, and the chief guard put me in charge of the prisoners. We talked about that last Sunday night when I was here with you. So there's another thing, even though I was in prison, they saw me as being different than the other prisoners. They saw me as somebody that they could trust, somebody that they could give me a job to do, and the job would get done. And I wouldn't argue about it or fuss about it. But let me tell you what happened. We had two prisoners that they put me in charge of. One of them was the chief officer, one of the chief officers for the king, the wine bearer, the one that went, and I told you last Sunday night that he gave the king his wine, he gave him his food. He even tested the food to make sure he didn't die. That's what food testers were for, and wine tasters. But he was the wine server. And then there was a baker, and the king threw both of them. He got mad with them, threw both of them in prison. Well, the chief guard, the warden, is what y'all call them today. The warden says, you take care of them too. You look after them, and I'm putting them in your care. So there again, God has given me somebody to take care of. Well, something happened. They come in one morning after they had got up. We were sitting around talking, and I looked at them, and both of them had this worried look on their face. And you know, if you hang around people long enough, you can start looking at them. Something's bothering you. Something's bothering you. And they had this worried look on their face. So I asked them, I said, why are y'all not well today? Both of them had a dream the night before. Both of them. Different dream. But I told them, I said, well, tell me the dreams. I can't interpret the dream, but God can interpret the dream through me. God's the one that interprets all the dreams. So just tell me what it was. I know you look unhappy, but God's the only one that can explain what your dream was. So the wine bearer, he comes out and he says, well, he said, I dreamed last night that there was 3 branches. And on those 3 branches, they started budding. And they started blossoming. They were vines. And grapes grew on those vines. He said, and I took the king's cup and I squeezed those grapes into the cup. And then I went and served the juice to the king. And I gave it to him. So I told him, I said, and God instantly revealed to me what the dream was. God said, here's what God told him. He said, the 3 branches stands for 3 days. 3 days, you're going to return to your work for the king. And you're going to serve wine as you did before. And when you are free, That's a simple dream, but here's what I want you to remember. When you're free, remember me. Remember to tell the king that I'm here in jail for no reason at all, no just cause, nothing that I did wrong or anything that I did put me in jail. A lie put me in jail. I want you to tell the king that. Remember me. That's what I told him. It was a simple dream, a simple explanation. And then the baker saw me tell him that dream, and it sounded so good to him. He said, well, tell me about my dream. I said, well, tell me your dream first. He said there was 3 baskets, bread baskets. They were on top of my head. He said, and on top of that top basket, there was all kind of baked goods in that basket. And he said, but the birds kept eating out of the top basket. They kept pecking at it and kept pecking the food until they had got all the food out of the basket. What does my dream mean? And instantly the Lord said, here's your interpretation. Tell him that the 3 baskets are also 3 days. In 3 days, before the end of the 3rd day, the king's going to cut your head off. Now, he didn't want to hear that. That was surprising to him because I just give good news to the wine bearer that he was going back to his regular job, and now you're telling me the king's going to cut my head off. And then after he cuts your head off, he's going to take your body and hang it on a pole, and the birds are going to come and eat your flesh. I told him what God told me to tell him. I don't like to be the bearer of bad news, but that's what God interpreted those dreams that I had to tell him. And you know what? Everything that I said happened exactly the way I said it. The next day, the king called the 2 out. He put the wine bearer back in charge. He took the baker and cut his head off and hung his body on a pole. And the birds came and ate his flesh. Now, just like God said was going to happen. You got to remember that me, Joseph, I didn't make these things up. God told me how to interpret those dreams. But guess what happened? The one that lived forgot all about me. Have you ever had a friend that you done a favor for, and then when you needed a favor done, they forgot you completely? That's what happened to me. Here I am in prison, and here I've interpreted the dreams. It went on for 2 years. 2 years that I sit there and wondering why that wine bearer hadn't told the king about me, or maybe he did tell the king about me. I didn't know what he had done, but I know that I'm still in prison. And I'm still serving the warden and helping people out. But you know, after that 2 years went by, the king had a dream. The king had a dream. In fact, he had 2 dreams himself. You know, you got a baker and a wine bearer. They each had a dream. Well, the king's going to have 2 dreams. And the king dreamed that he was standing on the Nile River, and he looked, and there were 7 fat and beautiful cows on the bank of the river. 7 big fat cows. And on the bank with them, there were 7 ugly, thin cows, looked like they hadn't ever eaten before. And they were standing beside the fat cows. It worried the king all day long. He didn't tell anybody except himself. And then the next night he went back to sleep. And he had another dream. He saw 7 full and good heads of grain growing on one stalk. And then 7 more heads sprang up that were very thin and burned by the east wind. And the thin heads ate the good heads. And so the king called all his magicians in. He began to worry. That's the first thing these people did back then, the soothsayers, everybody they could call, that maybe the wise men, even called the wise men in. And everyone in Egypt that come in, they couldn't interpret his dream. Guess who remembered me? the wine bearer. We're talking about a dream. Why wouldn't he remember it? This man told him of a dream. You know, he's in prison. There's a guy that told us exactly what was going to happen. He told us that I was going to get my job back and I was going to be serving you wine. And he said that you were going to cut the baker's head off and the birds were going to eat his flesh. And it happened exactly the way he said. Now, this is what the king wanted to hear. There was somebody, even though he was a prisoner, could tell me what I dreamed. So he sent for me, and he told me these things. So this chief officer, this wine server, finally remembered me after 2 years. Why did it take him 2 years? Because that was God's timing. Everything happens in God's timing, not our timing. I can't even tell you why it was 2 years, you know. God said, this is the way it's going to be. And guess what else? I've done a lot of things in 2 years in that prison. I talked to a lot of people about my God, and I helped save a lot of people. But when Pharaoh called me in, he wanted me to interpret that dream for him. And so I told him, I said, the 7 fat cows you saw is 7 good years that you're going to have. You're going to have plenty. And the 7 thin cows is going to be a time, 7 years of a drought and nothing. The same with the head of grain. And the grain, it's going to be a terrible time. You're going to have 7 good years, and then you're going to have 7 bad years, really bad years. You're not going to have any food, in other words, is what I told him. And I won't tell him these things other than God speaking through me. God was telling me what to tell him. And when I told him these things, I made a suggestion to him. He had asked his people, what can we do? And they didn't know. So what can we do? And I said, well, number one, for the first 7 years, when you got plenty, start storing some of it up, start saving. Save up all you can for 7 years, put it in storehouses. And then when you have the 7 bad years, you can start selling grain, trading grain. It's a business. You help save the people of Egypt. And Pharaoh thought it was a right good idea. So why don't we make you, Joseph, second in charge of the whole land of Egypt? Nobody in this whole land will be greater than you except me, is what the king said. So I'm second in command. And he told me to take care of the problem. And I did. I rose to power, and it was a different time. You go from being a shepherd, a farmer, to being second in command. You know what? He even gave me his ring with his insignia on it. You know what they do with the ring? You know what we did with the rings? When we wrote something, that ring, put it on it was like a stamp, and everybody knew it was a seal. And I had that ring on my hand to be able to seal a deal with anybody in the land of Egypt or any other land. So I rose to power. I had lots of power. And sure enough, we had 7 years of plenty. And then we had 7 years of dirt, dust, famine. Nothing grew. No grass grew. Nothing grew. It was a bad time. But guess what we had stored up? Food for everybody. We had plenty stored up. Now, we didn't just give everybody the food, but there was food there for enough people for Egypt to survive. The people and the animals to survive. So God made me fruitful again in the affliction that I was in. God made me fruitful. And I give God all the credit for what he helped me to do. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of famine. And then people, even outside of Egypt, started coming in, begging for food. And Pharaoh come to me And we didn't give them food. We traded for animals. We traded for money. If they had money, we would traded for gold, traded for silver, traded for anything, and we would give them their food. And it spread all over the land. And I opened up all the storehouses. Did you know a lot of people in Egypt didn't like that? They didn't want to help the outside people. This food's for us. No, but God, there was food there for plenty. This famine was happening because God wanted it to happen. There was food for plenty. People are like that. They think if you start giving their food away, after a while they're going to run out of food. Then they won't have any more, but no, we had plenty. We saved for 7 years. So the famine was over all of the earth. My father Jacob learned that there was grain in Egypt. And so he told the same sons that threw me in the pit that he wanted them to go down. He said, I heard there was grain there. I want you to go down and it's for sale. Take your money with you. Go down and buy us grain so that we might live and not die. So 10. How many of us were they to start with? 12. 12 of us. My father lost me, or thought he did. So there was 11 left. So he sent 10. Why did he only send 10? He didn't send Benjamin. He was the baby. He was my baby brother. Well, he had already lost one child that come from Rachel, and that's the woman that he really loved. And his last 2 children were from Rachel, and Rachel died in childbirth with Benjamin. So he feared that something might harm Benjamin. He said, so I'm not going to send him. You 10 go. No, he won't tell in those 10, you go and I don't care what happens to you, because my father loved all of us. But he thought he had lost me. He thought I was dead. But I was the governor. I was governor over all the land. And I was the one that sold to all the people that came to Egypt. They had to come before me first to make the deal. And Joseph's brothers, or Jacob's sons, my brothers, came. And they fell on their face to the ground right before me, begging that I might help them. Now, what did I dream when I was younger and they didn't like my dream about the stars? That all the stars would bow down before me? Here's the stars bowing down before me. Did I recognize them? Yes, I did. Did they recognize me? No, they didn't. Have you ever seen an Egyptian painting and how they paint the people up? Well, they had me painted real well, you know, the eye makeup and everything. There was no way, and here we are years later, there's no way they could recognize me, but I recognized all 10 of them. Every one of them, I could call them by name. I recognized them. I remembered the dream. And then I started what y'all call messing with them a little bit. I wasn't mad with them. They thought something was going on, but I'm going to mess with them a little bit. I told them, I said, y'all spies. Y'all bowing down before me, you're spies, and you've come to see the nakedness of our land, so you can go back and tell other people that Egypt's suffering. And one of my brothers spoke up and he said, no, we're all sons of one man. And guess what he said? We're honest men. We're honest men. And I'm sitting there thinking, you're an honest man, but you've told my father that I'm dead, that some animal has killed me, and you took my coat back to him and shredded it, and you sold me off, and you're honest men. Was there some bitterness there too? Sure. I'm having fun with them though. I still love them 10 brothers that's led. No matter what they've done to me, they're still my brothers. I'm gonna have some fun with them. I told them, y'all spies. They said, we are honest men, and we've never been spies. You know what they said? They said, we're your servants. We're your servants. I said they'd bow down before me, and I said they would serve me, and now they even admitting they're my servants, and they still don't even know who I am. But I'm still telling them they're spies. And I put them all in custody for 3 days, just to help them out a little bit to realize, you know, I think you're spies. On the 3rd day, I told him, I said, I want you to do this. And if you do what I say, you're going to live. I won't have you put to death. I won't have your heads cut off. Did you know the king then, as he did with the baker, could cut your head off just like that for any reason? There was times that I even worried myself that I was going to do something wrong. He cut my head off. That's just the type of person he was. But guess what I was? I could do the same thing if I wanted to. I could have pronounced judgment on them and had them all killed. Had them all of them head cut off, called them spies is what I called them anyway. But do this and I'll let you live, for I fear God. That's what I told them. If you're honest men, the way you say you are, if you're honest, let one of your brothers remain confined in custody, and the rest of you go and carry grain for the famine to your household, and bring me your youngest brother. Wow, I said something right there I probably shouldn't have said, because that could have given the whole thing away. Bring me your youngest brother. They hadn't told me yet that I had a younger brother. They said they had a brother, but they didn't say which. I told them, go bring your youngest brother. They should have seen right then, but they didn't. Bring me your youngest brother, and I won't have you put to death. And they did so. Listen what they said. In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of the soul when he begged us and we didn't listen. That's why distress has come upon us. Now they're thinking, my brothers are thinking, all this is happening because of what we did with our second youngest brother, what we did with Joseph, me. They're thinking all this has come upon them because of what they did to me. And then Reuben, the oldest, he spoke up. He said, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? You know, Reuben was the one that wanted to save me. Reuben's the one that come back and I was gone, and he wanted to save me. And Reuben said, y'all just didn't listen to me. So now there comes a reckoning for his blood. See, they still think I'm dead. And this is a reckoning for his blood. They didn't know that I understood what they were saying. Guess why? We spoke 2 different languages. They come from southern. They had the southern language. They had a different language than the Egyptians had. I knew both, because I had been in Egypt long enough that I learned their language. And so I was using an interpreter to go through it, but I knew everything they were saying the whole time. You know what I did? I went out back for a minute. I'll be right back. And the interpreter, told them that I had to go somewhere. Well, they didn't know where I was going, but I actually went in a secluded place. I got in what we called a closet, and I cried like a baby, because here was my brothers, and they've come for help. And I didn't want to cry in front of them, because I'm still got a little bit of threat upon them that they're having to suffer a little bit now. And then I come back and I spoke to them, and I kept Simeon and bound him right before their eyes. I tied him up and bound him right before their eyes, and I gave orders for my servants to fill their bags with grain and replace every man's money in their sack. In other words, I won't take in their money. I put it back in the top of their sack. And I gave them provisions for the journey. I gave them enough to get back home so they wouldn't starve. I gave them enough to drink to get back home. I done this for them. And then they loaded up their donkeys, put their grain on the donkeys, and they left. They left Simeon with me. On the way home, one of them opened up his sack to feed the donkey, and he saw the money in the mouth of his sack. He said, my money's been put back in here. The money's still in the sack, right in the mouth of it. And it scared them all. Their hearts failed them. They all started trembling and talking to each other. You know what question they asked? What is this that God has done to us? Now they want to blame God, for getting them in trouble. But they came to Jacob, my father, in the land of Canaan, and they told him all that happened. They said, the man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us. Yes, I did. But I wanted them to feel that way for a little while. Isn't that ugly? That I wanted them to feel that way for a little while. No, I knew what I was going to do all along, and I knew God was with me. But he took us to be spies, is what they told Jacob. But we are honest men, and we've never been spies. 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more. This is what they said. They thought I was dead, right on. And the youngest in this day with our father in the land of Canaan. But this man told us to go back. And we don't want to tell you this, Father, but he's got Simeon, and he wants us to bring him Benjamin. Of course, they didn't call him, they didn't say I called him by name, just bring your youngest son with you. And he said if we done that, he would know we were honest men and that we weren't spies. But if I didn't come back or we didn't come back, Simeon would have to pay the price. He said, take the grain for the famine of your households and go your way. He sent us home with grain. Bring us your youngest brother, and then I'll know that you're not spies. And as they emptied their sacks in front of their father, evidently didn't one look in their sack on the way home, but when they started emptying the sacks in front of Jacob, they found something that they didn't know. Every man's bundle, every man's sack had money in the sack that they had taken for it. When they saw that, and their father saw that, he made a comment. He says, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. In other words, he's going to kill Simeon because y'all stole money from him now. But they said, Father, we didn't steal the money. We gave them the money, and we didn't know it was in the sacks till we just opened it up. And our father said, now you want to take Benjamin? You want to take Benjamin with you? And Reuben said to his father, kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. So Reuben had 2 sons. And he said, if I go and take Benjamin and don't bring Benjamin back, you can kill my 2 sons. I will guarantee you that I'm going to bring Benjamin back. So you need to let him go. Our father said, you can't. He said, I just can't let you go because his brother's dead and he's the only one left from Rachel. I just can't let you do it. If something would harm him on the journey that you go, you would bring down my gray hairs with sorrow to show. The famine got worse. We were still trying to talk our father into letting us go, or they were, to come back to get Simeon. He wasn't going to let them until the famine grew so bad that they had to have grain again. They had to have food again. And their father told them, says, go again, but buy us a little food. And here comes Judah. Judah spoke up. The man solely warned us, saying that you cannot see my face again unless you've got your brother with you, Benjamin. We had to bring our young brother, or we won't even go see his face. If we'd have gone back, the 9 of us had gone back without Benjamin, we'd have never seen him. We'd never see him. That's what they were saying. And that's what I told them too. I told them not to come back without him, without your younger brother. But Reuben said, put him in my hands, and I'll take care of him. I will be sure that he gets back. I've run out of time again already. I told you this story it gets so much better and better and better. Next Sunday, I'm going to tell you about what happens when my brothers return. They did come back. They did return. They came back to Egypt. And next Sunday, we'll pick up right there, and I'll tell you some more of the story. But while you're waiting till next Sunday, just think about what I've had to go through compared to what I was making them go through. Won't the same. You might say, I knew what I was going to do all along, and I was having a little bit of fun with them. But they were scared to death. Finally, the big, brave, strong men that throwed me in the hole was scared of me because they didn't know who I was. But it's the same person. Aren't you the same person when you get up in the morning that you were yesterday? Unless you were a sinner yesterday and you woke up this morning a saved person, then you're different. You're different. Saved people wake up every morning and say, thank you for waking me up. Thank you for waking me up. Anyway, we'll pick up there next week when we come back. It's been nice being with you tonight, so it's time to go.